to say your name.
Maxim Gershunoff.
Maxim Gershunoff.
Maxime.
So, Maxime.
Like the French restaurant. Da da ba 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 da ba 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 ba.
So tell me, where were you born?
I was born in New York City.
With what kind of background? Your
My parents both came from Russia. Both musicians. My mother a cellist, and my father a flutist. My parents, as I told you just before, came from Russia, and they were en route to Argentina via Southampton, England. There were only so many people allowed to enter the United States from different countries. The quota was full, and they were going to Argentina. I was not born yet. My brother was. And it was very interesting because the coincidence was that later in my life, at the recommendation of the great Sir Frederick Ashton of the Royal Ballet, who I knew very well, and he knew my background, beginning from music, going into my very interest in management and in the business of what asks and builds audiences to come in to symphony orchestras and ballet. When the Royal Ballet was on tour in America, the great Saul Hurok commented, because there were some problems, saying that it's very hard to find people to be in his organization or in general that are very familiar with music, dance, and the business. So Sir Frederick Ashton said, when you're in Los Angeles, there's someone I think you should meet. Unknown to me, when the Royal Ballet came into Los Angeles, Freddie Ashton called me. He said, Max, I've had a very interesting conversation with Saul Hurok. He would very much like to meet you. Could you meet him at the Ambassador Hotel at 5:30 Friday? Well, to me at that point, to hear that Saul Hurok, this was the greatest impresario in this country, at the time that there were no grants, no outside money, all his own personal risks. That, I would say, is an impresario, for real, not a name. And he introduced then ballet and classical music in New York, when there were a lot of immigrants coming at that time from European cultures, and they were hungry for this culture here in America, certainly at that time focused in the East Coast, in New York. So he had arranged concerts at very low prices. Although when he came here at age 15, he took odd jobs anywhere, even driving a trolley car in Philadelphia. But his interest was the arts. When he returned, he got into this business of his own with concerts for the people. And there was no marketing. He was able, through the unions, to let the membership of the various unions know that people can see and hear wonderful concerts in the Hippodrome, a big auditorium in New York, at very low prices. He developed a tremendous following, and it got enormous, probably the major presenter in America. And then during war, it even got into U.S. cultural exchange, which then is a fascinating story in the history here in the 1960s. When it was an exchange, State Department signed treaty with Goskoncert in Russia for head-to-head exchange. It was a window from the east to the west and the west to the east through the Iron Curtain. It was the only communication. And it had to include the heads of representatives, science, medicine, performing arts, education, tourism, and sports. And this went on. We had to sign in Washington, and 2 years later renewed in Moscow. This went on for 12. It was the only communication during the Cold War. Yurok was able to do that. I speak Russian. I know the arts very well, and I became very involved in that aspect even, aside from other things that I was doing there. And traveling with so many of these Russians, the purpose of it was, excuse me, that they could see the difference in the two economic formulas. Capitalism, I say this advisedly, communityism, communism. So that they could learn. I would speak to them where I could help them to sort out their own decisions. For me, it was 12 years alone, aside from everything that I was doing, of fascinating experience. And I had found that we are changing here in our country, politically, if I may say, where it's a flip-flop. Where we go now, there's a certain group that want to keep us very low here in education, which say is unfortunate in many aspects, including the arts. Recreational entertainment is very big, but that to me is an art, but it's a diversion. I'm very, very critical about the realities, and at my age, going now on 91, I must leave the thoughts for people in the future to deal with the problems ahead, worldwide, because we are now all neighbors. We should love each other and not compete with one another for money. It's a very delicate thing, and one of the best things is for us to share in the arts.